There was a moment in our past when the sky turned against us. Imagine waking to a dawn that never comes. The sun smothered by ash, the oceans churning, and cities of stone dissolving into mud as if they had never been. Now imagine someone survived that night, wrote down what happened, and hid it in clay for 5,000 years. Tonight on Moonlight Science, we follow those buried lines back to a forbidden memory. Sumerian texts that quietly whisper something almost unbearable. That humanity was not just created by the Anunnaki once, but twice. And the reason they started over is the secret that will not make sense until the final minutes of this story. Before we can stand in the flickering torchlight of Sumerian temples, we have to return to a world with no bricks, no palaces, no written words, only cold, wind, and fire. The earth lies under the grip of the last ice age. Vast, white sheets of ice press down over continents. A frozen weight that flattens mountains and redirects the winds. Between these walls of ice, long plains of steppe and tundra stretch to horizons without cities. Mammoths move like shadows across the snow. Bison crowd the river valleys, and saber-toothed cats slip through the low fog, unseen until it is too late. Scattered across this harsh landscape, small groups of humans cling to life. They do not yet sow fields or raise walls. They follow herds, read tracks, and learn every bend of every river in a territory that must feed them or they die. At night, they gather around small fires scratched out of wood and dry grass. Sparks drift up into a sky so dark and clean that the Milky Way looks like spilled flour. Above them, the constellations turn with mechanical precision. For thousands of years, the heavens are the only calendar they know. Their eyes are exactly like yours. Their brains are as capable as any astronomer or engineer alive today. They have no writing, but they have memory. Layered, oral, sung. The elders watch the stars night after night, season after season. They know exactly when a familiar cluster should rise over a certain hill, how the position of a bright star marks the time to move, to hunt, to prepare. To them, the sky is not abstract. It is the clock of survival. Then something begins to shift. At first, it is almost nothing. A winter that lingers a little too long, a summer that ends too soon. Rains that once came at predictable times now drift and hesitate. Some years the rivers swell to strange, unfamiliar heights. Other years they shrink and choke with dust. The elders notice that the stars seem out of step with the weather they have always announced. The same constellations rise, but the winds they once heralded arrive late or not at all. It is as if a vast gear in the machinery of the world has slipped a tooth. The animals respond before the humans do. Herds that once followed the same ancient paths veer off, seeking grass in places that were never important before. Calving grounds fall silent. Fish vanish from old, reliable inlets and appear in new, confusing ones. For people whose lives are tied to these patterns, this is not a small change. It is a quiet terror, an unease that seeps into their rituals and their stories. They begin to tell one another, in low voices around the fire, that something in the sky itself is growing restless. The Sumerians, thousands of years later, will not remember these details. They will inhabit a new world entirely, one of rivers tamed by canals, of temples rising above the plain, of kings and scribes and numbers cut into clay. But in their texts they will preserve a faint echo of this earlier age. They will write of a time before the kingship descended from heaven, an era when there were no cities, only places. They will name 5 primordial cities: Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, Shurupak, as if they already existed in a half-mythic form before true history began. On the Sumerian king list, the rulers of this before age are given lifespans so vast they blur into eternity, 28,800 years, 36,000 years, reigns that no flesh could sustain. To us, these numbers are obvious exaggerations. But within their exaggeration lies a feeling that the time before the Great Break was unimaginably long, stable, almost timeless. Then, in a single line, everything changes. Then the flood swept over. We, with our satellites and ice cores, will one day speak of the end of the Pleistocene, of abrupt warming and then a sudden, savage return to near glacial cold around 12,800 years ago, of a period now called the Younger Dryas. For those who lived through it, there were no such words. There were only rivers that climbed out of their beds and never quite went back, sudden walls of water racing across plains, storms that set forests burning from horizon to horizon. Coastlines crept inland, swallowing the lowlands where people had lived for generations. Whole landscapes were redrawn within a human lifetime. Those who survived did the only thing humans can do when facing an event too big to fully grasp. They turned it into story. Not a scientist's report, but a pattern, a warning, a tale for children and grandchildren. In one version, later put into clay, the gods grew angry at the clamor of mankind. In another, the world had simply grown too full. The language would differ from place to place, but the shape would be the same. There was a before, there was a flood, and after that, the world was not the same. By the time kings rule in Uruk and Nippur, by the time scribes sit in schools and learn their wedge-shaped signs, that before has already become legend. Yet its shadow lies behind every mention of before the flood, behind every impossible reign length, behind every insistence that kingship once came down from the sky. In that shadow, a dangerous idea will take root, that humanity itself may have been a response to that first catastrophe. Not a random accident of evolution, but a project begun in the ruins of an earlier world. A project that, as the Sumerian texts hint with unnerving calm, could be restarted if the first attempt failed. Now we step out of that ancient cold and into a different kind of stillness. The room around you grows softer. The hum of the modern world fades to a murmur. Here at Moonlight Science, we do not chase the frantic pace of headlines or the glare of breaking news. We move slowly, as if walking through a museum after hours, when the crowds have gone and the artifacts can finally be seen in their own quiet light. Tonight, that light falls on objects so old they make the pyramids look like recent construction. Clay tablets, palm-sized and unassuming, carrying words that have waited 5,000 years for someone to read them again. These tablets are our time machines. They do not gleam like gold or tower like monuments. Most of them are the color of dried earth, chipped at the edges, cracked down the middle, sometimes burned nearly black. They were found not in treasure vaults, but in the rubble of collapsed buildings, buried under centuries of sand and later civilizations that had long forgotten their meaning. Archaeologists shipped them by the thousands to museums in London, Paris, Berlin, and Baghdad, where they sat in drawers and storage rooms, waiting for scholars patient enough to decode their strange, wedge-shaped script. The script is called cuneiform, from the Latin word for wedge. It was made by pressing the corner of a reed stylus into wet clay, turning and angling to form hundreds of distinct signs. Learning to read it takes years. Learning to read it well takes a lifetime. Yet when the clay dried, or better still, when the libraries that held these tablets burned and the fire hardened the clay into ceramic, the words became nearly indestructible. Paper rots, leather crumbles, digital files corrupt, and servers fail. but fired clay can survive 5 millennia in the ground and emerge with every syllable intact. What the tablets say, once you can read them, is not always comfortable. We expect ancient religious texts to speak of love, of divine benevolence, of a creator who fashioned humanity out of tenderness and hope. The Sumerian and Babylonian tablets do not always oblige. They speak of gods who grew tired, who argued, who made mistakes. They describe humanity not as the crown of creation, but as a solution to a labor shortage. They hint, in passages scattered across multiple texts, that the version of humanity walking the earth today may not be the first attempt, that an earlier model was judged, found wanting, and almost entirely erased. This is the question we carry into the hours ahead. Not whether the Anunnaki were real in some literal, physical sense. That is a question for philosophers and physicists, and we will let them argue. Our question is simpler and stranger. What did the Sumerians themselves believe about where we came from? When they pressed their styluses into wet clay and recorded the oldest stories we possess, what were they trying to tell us? And why do those stories contain, again and again, the idea of a break, a creation, a failure, a flood, and then a second beginning under new and stricter rules? As you settle deeper into wherever you are listening from tonight, let the answers come slowly. There is no rush. The tablets have already waited longer than any empire has lasted. They can wait a few hours more while we trace the cuneiform signs with careful attention, letting the story surface like an image developing in dim red light. The ancients who wrote these words did not expect them to survive. They did not know that one day, people on the other side of the planet would lie in the dark, headphones on, and listen to their secrets read aloud in a language they never could have imagined. Yet here we are, and there they are, and the night is long enough for both. Let us drift now, as if carried on a warm night wind, southward and backward in time. Below us, the land of southern Mesopotamia unfolds like a dark tapestry stitched with silver. The Tigris and the Euphrates, those twin arteries of civilization, split and braid into 1,000 smaller channels. Marshes stretch toward the horizon, thick with reeds that whisper against one another in the dark. The moon, a thin crescent, hangs low and casts just enough light to catch the water. Canals cut straight as intentions, reflecting the sky like scattered mirrors. And there, on patches of earth raised just above the wetlands, lights flicker. Not the lights of our world, not electric, not constant. These are oil lamps and torch flames, small and orange, clustered in patterns that suggest walls, courtyards, temples. These are the first cities. Eridu, the oldest, sits where fresh water meets the sea, sacred to Enki, god of wisdom and the deep. Further north, Uruk rises, already enormous, its population swelling toward numbers the world has never seen gathered in one place. Nippur glows with a different kind of importance. It is the religious heart, the seat of Enlil, where the fates of kings are decided by priests who read the will of heaven. 6,000 years ago, these cities were not ruins waiting to be excavated. They were alive, humming with commerce and prayer, with the shouts of laborers and the quiet scratch of styluses on wet clay. And it is from these cities that our first true map of the ancient past emerges. A document so strange it has puzzled scholars since its discovery. The Sumerian king list. The king list survives in several versions, copied and recopied by scribes across centuries. Its purpose was political, to legitimize current rulers by connecting them to an unbroken chain of kingship stretching back to the beginning of time. but its content is something else entirely. It begins not with history as we understand it, but with a declaration that sounds almost like myth. After the kingship descended from heaven, it reads, "The kingship was in Eridu." What follows is a roster of kings and cities from before the great flood. Their names are given with care, their cities are named, but their reign lengths are impossible. Alulim of Eridu ruled for 28,800 years. Alogar, his successor, ruled for 36,000. The list continues through 8 kings and 5 cities, each reign stretching across millennia that no human body could endure. The total span of this antediluvian age, by the list's own arithmetic, exceeds 200,000 years. Then comes a single line, quiet and devastating. Then the flood swept over. After the flood, everything changes. The kingship descends from heaven again, this time to the city of Kish. The reign lengths, while still impressive, begin to shrink. A king rules for 200 years, then 900, then a few hundred. By the time we reach the first dynasty of Uruk, the numbers become almost believable. Gilgamesh himself is credited with 126 years. Long, certainly, but no longer the stuff of pure fantasy. What are we to make of this? Historians see a literary device, a way of lending grandeur to the deep past. Mythologists see echoes of a golden age, a time when humans lived closer to the gods. But there is another possibility, one the list itself seems to whisper without ever stating plainly. What if the humans before the flood were different? What if the impossibly long reigns are not exaggerations, but dim memories of a species, or a version of a species, that no longer exists? The flood, in this reading, is not just a disaster. It is a dividing line between 2 kinds of humanity. And the shorter reigns that follow are not a return to normalcy, but the signature of a new model, built with limits the first one lacked. If the king list can calmly tell us that kingship descended from heaven, then we have to ask what kind of heaven the Sumerians meant. Not a vague paradise of clouds and harp music, but a place with structure and authority. A court, a council chamber above the world, imagined as real as any palace in Uruk. This is where the Anunnaki take their seats, not as distant symbols, but as ruling powers whose decisions ripple down into harvests, plagues, dynasties, and floods. When the tablets speak, they speak as if the universe has administrators. To feel it the way a Mesopotamian might, picture yourself at night climbing the steps of a ziggurat. Below, the city's breath, bakers, guards, animals, the low roar of thousands of lives held together by walls and rations. Above, wind and a sky so dense with stars it looks crowded. The temple is not simply a building, it is a bridge between the human world and the divine one. The people bring offerings upward, the gods send fate downward. In that thin space between earth and sky, the Anunnaki become imaginable. A council beneath a ceiling of constellations, luminous presences arranged in rank, each with a domain, a temperament, and a claim. At the highest point sits Anu, the sky god, remote and almost motionless in the stories. He is less a character than a throne, an authority so absolute it rarely needs to speak. Beneath him is Enlil, lord of wind and air, the force of command. In the texts, he feels like weather given a will. Stern, quick to anger, protective of order, offended by disruption. And then there is Enki, called Ea in Akkadian, god of the sweet subterranean waters, of craft, intelligence, and the dangerous art of finding a way around a decree without breaking it. Where Enlil is law, Enki is loophole. Where Enlil is punishment, Enki is rescue carried out through whispers. Around this triad gather other great names that will later cross Gilgamesh's path. Shamash the sun, judge and witness. Sin the moon, keeper of calendars. Inanna Ishtar, love and war in one restless body. Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld's dust. The unsettling part is not their power, it is their personality. They hunger, they take offense, they bargain, they change their minds. Their world is not built on pure compassion. It is built on balance, status, and control. The tablets do not present creation as a gentle gift. They present it as policy. In that worldview, humanity is woven into an economy. Temples are not only places of worship, they are engines, granaries, workshops, accounting houses, where offerings are gathered and redistributed. The gods, in story after story, are portrayed as dependent on that flow. When sacrifices stop, they gather like flies around the smoke when it returns. That image is startlingly physical, almost embarrassing, and that is exactly why it matters. It suggests that the relationship is not parent to child. It is ruler to laborer, fuel to machine. And this is where the chilling logic sharpens. In the older epics, before any flood resets the world, the gods themselves have a labor problem. The junior gods do the heavy work, digging canals, raising earthworks, maintaining the world's infrastructure, until they revolt. They burn their tools. They surround the house of authority. The divine order wobbles under a complaint that sounds almost modern. We are tired of being used. The solution that emerges is not mercy. It is substitution. Create a new worker. Clay is shaped. Something divine is mixed into it. Blood, essence, intelligence. And humanity rises not as a beloved creation, but as an engineered answer to a crisis. If that is how humans enter the story, then the king list's strange seam. The impossible ages before the flood, the abrupt break, the more realistic ages after, starts to read less like mere exaggeration and more like a quiet admission. A first version existed, it failed, and the council did what councils do. They revised the design. The story of how we began is not hidden. It was written down, baked into clay, and buried for millennia beneath the sands of what is now Iraq. When scholars pieced the fragments together, they found a creation myth older than Genesis, older than any text the Western world had called sacred. It is called the Atrahasis, and it does not flatter us. It does not speak of a loving father sculpting his children with care. It speaks of crisis management, of desperate engineering, of a species assembled in haste to solve a problem that had nothing to do with us. The story begins before humans exist. The cosmos is already organized, the great gods seated in their stations, the world below divided into domains of sky, earth, and water. But the world requires maintenance. Rivers must be dredged. Canals must be dug. Mountains must be shaped. The raw infrastructure of existence kept in working order. This labor falls to the junior gods, the Igigi, divine beings lower in rank but not in strength. For ages beyond counting, they do the work. They lift, they dig, they haul. And slowly, over time, measured not in years, but in cosmic ages, they grow tired. The Atrahasis describes their exhaustion in terms that feel strangely familiar. The load is excessive, they cry. The work too hard, the trouble too much. These are not abstract complaints. They are the language of workers pushed to their limit. And one night, in the darkness before dawn, they do what workers throughout history have done. They revolt. The text says they set their tools on fire. They surround the dwelling of Enlil, the god of command, and refuse to leave. The divine order trembles on the edge of collapse. Enlil is shaken. He demands answers, calls for punishment. But the crisis is too large for discipline alone. The Igigi will not return to their labor. The world's infrastructure will crumble. And so the Council of the Anunnaki convenes, not to punish, but to solve. It is here that Enki, the clever one, the god of wisdom and deep waters, rises with a proposal. Let a worker be created, he says. Let a primitive being bear the yoke. The plan is radical but simple. Make something new, something capable of toil, something that will carry the burden the Igigi have thrown down. The mother goddess, called variously Nintu, Mami, or Beletili, is summoned. She will do the shaping. But clay alone is not enough. To give this new creature life and intelligence, something divine must be added. A god is chosen, one described as having intelligence, as if that quality could be harvested. He is slaughtered. His flesh and blood are mixed into the clay. And from that mixture, the first humans are formed. Imagine them rising, eyes blinking in unfamiliar light, hands flexing without memory. They do not know why they exist. They do not know they were built to replace a workforce that quit. They only know the tools placed in their hands and the commands given to their ears. From the first breath, they are laborers. They dig the canals the Igigi abandoned. They plant the fields that feed the temples. They carry the load so that the gods can rest. This is humanity 1.0. Not a masterpiece, but a prototype. Assembled from mud and divine residue, set loose into a world that needs them only for what they can produce. Their lives are brief, their purpose clear, their origins a transaction sealed in blood. And yet, as the tablets will soon reveal, even this first design will prove too successful, too noisy, too fertile, too alive for the comfort of those who made it. At first, everything works exactly as planned. The humans do what they were made to do. They rise before dawn and labor until dark. They dig the channels that carry water to the fields. They plant the barley and harvest the grain. They raise the mud bricks that become temples and granaries. The smoke of their offerings rises daily toward heaven, and the gods, for the first time since the Igigi revolt, can rest. The experiment is a success. The divine order stabilizes. The world hums along like a well-maintained machine. But the Atrahasis does not end there. It continues with a problem no one anticipated. Humans do not simply work. They live. They marry. They have children, and those children have children. Within generations, the population swells. Villages become towns. Towns press against one another and become cities. The floodplain, once quiet under the stars, fills with the sounds of humanity. Arguments and laughter, babies crying through the night, festivals that stretch until dawn, the endless murmur of a species that does not know how to be still. The texts use a specific word for this: noise. It is not merely sound. It is the chaos of unchecked life, the vibration of a world growing too full. And it rises, night after night, toward the heavens where the gods are trying to sleep. Enlil, the stern enforcer of order, is the first to complain. The noise disturbs his rest. What began as a solution has become an irritation, and irritation in a being with power to reshape the world is dangerous. The council convenes. Enlil demands action. The humans are too many, too loud, too alive. And so begins a series of interventions that the tablets record with chilling calm. First, plague. A sickness sweeps through the cities, filling the streets with the dying. The noise dims. But humans are resilient. The survivors recover. They have more children. The population climbs again. Next comes drought. The rains stop. Rivers shrink to trickles. Famine follows, hollowing out the cities. Again the noise fades. And again Humanity claws its way back. The rains return. Babies are born. The clamor rises once more. With each failed attempt, a pattern emerges. Humanity cannot be easily throttled. It adapts, it endures, it multiplies. Each time the gods strike it down, it stands back up, louder than before. The Anunnaki have created something they cannot fully control, a worker that has become a force of nature. It is here, in the mounting frustration of the divine council, that the final solution takes shape. Plague has failed. Drought has failed. Famine has failed. If partial measures cannot quiet the earth, then perhaps only a total measure will do. The whisper that passes through the assembly is simple and absolute. Let the waters rise. Let everything be swept clean. Let the experiment end, and let the silence return. The first humanity, it seems, was not a success after all. It was a draft, and drafts can be erased. The decision, once made, moves with the weight of inevitability. Enlil has had enough. The plagues did not work. The droughts did not last. Humanity keeps rising, keeps multiplying, keeps filling the night with its unbearable noise. And so the Lord of Air in command proposes something final, not a thinning, not a warning, an erasure. Let the waters rise from below and fall from above. Let the rivers forget their banks. Let the sea climb onto the land. Let everything that breathes be swept into silence. The council agrees. The gods bind themselves to secrecy with an oath. No divine being will warn the humans of what is coming. The world will end, and the workers will never see it approach. This is not punishment dressed as justice. It is pest control carried out by committee. But Enki, the clever one, cannot bring himself to let his creation vanish entirely. He does not openly defy the oath. He is too wise for that. Instead, he finds a loophole thin as a reed. He goes to the house of a man named Atrahasis, a king of Shuruppak, faithful in his offerings, wise among his people. And Enki speaks, not to the man, but to the wall of his reed hut. "Wall, listen to me," he says. "Reed wall, pay attention." Through the wall, the forbidden message passes. A flood is coming. Build a boat. Seal it with pitch. Take aboard your family, your craftsmen, the seed of all living things. Abandon your possessions. Seek life. Atrahasis obeys. He tears down his house and uses the materials to construct an ark, vast, sealed, dark as a womb. His neighbors must have thought him mad, dismantling a home to build a boat on dry land. But he does not stop. He loads the vessel with grain and animals, with the people he trusts, with everything that might survive what is coming. And then he seals the door from inside and waits. The storm arrives, not as weather, but as war. The sky tears open. Rain falls in sheets so thick the horizon vanishes. The rivers swell and burst. The sea forgets where it ends. For 6 days and 7 nights, the world drowns. The tablet says that even the gods are terrified by what they have unleashed. They retreat to the highest heaven and crouch there like frightened dogs, watching their creation dissolve into mud and silence. The goddess who helped shape humanity weeps. "How could I agree to this evil in the assembly?" she cries. "I gave birth to my people, and now they fill the sea like fish." When the storm finally exhausts itself, the waters begin to slowly withdraw. The ark comes to rest on a mountain. Atrahasis sends out birds, a dove, a swallow, a raven. And when the raven does not return, he knows the earth is breathing again. He opens the door and steps out into a world that is silent, emptied, and waiting. The first experiment is over. What comes next will be something new. The man who steps off the ark has many names. In one tradition, he is Atrahasis, the exceedingly wise. In another, he is Ziusudra, he of long life. In the version that Gilgamesh will one day hear, he is called Utnapishtim, the faraway. The names change as the story passes from Sumerian to Akkadian to Babylonian, but the figure remains the same. A single human who survived the erasure, standing now on a silent mountaintop, looking out over a world scrubbed clean of everything he knew. The landscape before him is unrecognizable. The cities are gone, Shurupak, Eridu, all the places where humans once gathered and made their noise. The fields that fed the temples lie beneath leagues of mud. The rivers have carved new paths through unfamiliar terrain. There are no voices, no smoke rising from cooking fires, no children crying in the night. The quiet that Enlil wanted has finally arrived, and it is absolute. Utnapishtim does the only thing he knows to do. He builds an altar from whatever he can find on the barren peak. He gathers wood, arranges it carefully, and sets it alight. Then he offers a sacrifice: meat, grain, the precious stores he carried through the flood. The smoke rises, thin and fragrant, climbing toward a heaven that has been starved of offerings for 7 days and 7 nights. The gods smell it. The text says they gather around the smoke like flies. It is an image almost too honest, too undignified for a divine pantheon, but it reveals something essential about the Mesopotamian understanding of the relationship between humans and gods. The gods need us, not our love, not our worship in some abstract sense, but our literal, physical offerings. Without humans to tend the fields and burn the sacrifices, the divine realm goes hungry. The Yakikok flood that was meant to solve a problem has created a new one. Enlil arrives at the sacrifice and is furious. Someone has survived. The oath was broken. The erasure is incomplete. He demands to know who is responsible, and all eyes turn to Enki, who does not deny his role. Instead, he argues. He rebukes Enlil for the excess of his solution. "Why did you bring about the flood?" he asks. "Let the lion diminish the people. Let the wolf diminish the people. Let famine diminish the people. But do not destroy them utterly." It is a plea for proportion, for management rather than annihilation. The argument works. Or perhaps the gods are simply too hungry to stay angry. In the end, a strange compromise is reached. Utnapishtim will not be killed for surviving. Instead, he and his wife are granted something no other human will ever receive: immortality. But it comes with exile. They are taken to a distant place, at the mouth of the rivers, far from the world of mortals. There they will live, forever, alone, a living memory of the first creation. In this lonely figure, the bridge between two humanities is preserved. One day, a desperate king will cross the world to find him and ask the only question that matters: how do I escape death? The answer is already waiting, sealed in an immortal witness who remembers when the sky itself fell. The waters recede. The mud dries and cracks under a sun that seems, for the first time in memory, gentle rather than punishing. Seeds that survived in the ark's dark belly are pressed into the damp earth. Animals scatter across the empty land, finding new territories in a world without boundaries. And somewhere in the silence, a decision is made in the heavens. The experiment will continue, but this time with revisions. The Sumerian king list records this moment with a simplicity that hides its enormity. After the flood swept over, it says, kingship descended from heaven. The phrase is almost identical to the one that opened the antediluvian age, and yet everything around it has changed. The first time kingship fell, it landed in Eridu, and the kings who followed ruled for tens of thousands of years. Now it falls to Kish, and the rains begin to shrink. The first post-Diluvian king rules for over 1,000 years, still impossible, but already a fraction of his predecessors. With each generation, the numbers contract further. By the time we reach Uruk, the rains are measured in decades, not millennia. Something fundamental has shifted. What are we witnessing in this quiet arithmetic? One reading is literary. The scribes simply exaggerated the distant past for effect and grew more realistic as they approached their own time. But there is another reading, one the texts themselves seem to invite. What if the shorter rains are not a scribal convention, but a feature? What if the humans who emerge after the flood are genuinely different from those who came before, built with limits, designed to burn out faster, calibrated to never again fill the world with so much noise that the gods lose sleep? The cities that rise from the floodplain seem to carry this new design in their bones. Kish, Uruk, Ur. They grow rapidly, organized around temples and granaries, their populations swelling but somehow more managed. Writing appears not as art, but as accounting. Lists of grain, inventories of livestock, records of labor owed and rendered. The bureaucracy of the gods has been transferred to their human servants. Where the first humanity seems to have lived without clear structure, the second is born into hierarchy. Kings answer to priests who answer to gods who watch from ziggurats that rise like ladders toward the sky. In the scribal schools of these new cities, young apprentices learn their craft by copying old texts. They press their styluses into wet clay and reproduce, line by line, the stories of what came before. There was a time before the flood, the old tablets say. The students copy the words without questioning them. The antediluvian age becomes a lesson, a fable, a warning, but no longer a living memory. The witnesses are gone, save one immortal exile at the mouth of the rivers. The rest is inherited silence. And so Humanity 2.0 begins its story, unaware that it is a second draft. The cities grow, the temples fill with offerings, the kings rise and fall in reigns that now fit within a single human imagination. History, as we know it, has begun. But it is built on a foundation of erasure, a quiet truth written in clay, and then gently, deliberately, forgotten. Into this second world, this revised creation of shorter lives and careful records, a king is born who does not fit neatly into the design. His name is Gilgamesh, and the tablets tell us something strange about his composition. He is 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal. The mathematics are impossible, and yet the texts insist upon them. It is as if the scribes are trying to say that this man exists at a seam, a place where two kinds of being overlap without fully merging. The evidence for Gilgamesh as a historical figure is stronger than many realize. The Sumerian king list places him in the first dynasty of Uruk, fifth in the line of rulers after the flood. His reign is given as 126 years, long but no longer mythic. The Tumul inscription, a dry administrative record of temple construction, mentions him alongside his son Ur-Nungal as builders who contributed to the sanctuary of Ninlil in Nippur. This is not poetry. It is bureaucracy. It places Gilgamesh in the same category as other kings whose existence no one doubts. Cylinder seals have been found bearing inscriptions that read, "Servant of Gilgamesh," suggesting a functioning court, an administration, a network of officials who owed loyalty to this specific name. His name appears in personal names of later generations, a common practice for honoring revered or deified ancestors. The physical city he ruled, Uruk, is real and excavated. Its massive walls, its temple complexes, its dense urban footprint all confirming that a powerful king must have commanded the resources and authority to build them. And yet, The Gilgamesh of the epic is more than an administrator. He is a force of nature. The poem describes him as a wild bull, restless and overwhelming. He exhausts his people with labor and arrogance. He takes what he wants, leaves no son to his father, no bride to her groom. His energy is so immense that the citizens of Uruk cry out to the heavens for relief. This is not the behavior of a well-calibrated second-generation human. This is something older, something louder, something that echoes the very traits that made the first humanity intolerable to the gods. Perhaps that is the point. Gilgamesh is not a flaw in humanity 2.0. He is a reminder. His divine blood carries something the flood was meant to wash away. A vitality, an ambition, a refusal to accept limits. He rules a city of fired bricks and ration bowls, of scribes and calendars and controlled fertility. And yet, he himself is uncontrollable. He builds walls not merely for defense, but as monuments to his own restlessness. He seeks glory not because he needs it, but because something in him cannot stop reaching. It is this quality that will eventually drive him out of his city, across the world, to the edge of existence itself. He will go looking for the one man who escaped death, the survivor of the first creation, the witness to the flood, the immortal exile. He will go because he has glimpsed the truth the second humanity was designed to forget. That once, long ago, things were different, and he cannot accept that they must stay this way. The Epic of Gilgamesh begins and ends in the same place, on top of a wall. It is a strange choice for a story about gods and monsters, friendship and death, a journey to the edge of the world and back. And yet, the poem insists. Go up on the wall of Uruk and walk around, Gilgamesh tells his companion. Examine its foundation, inspect its brickwork. Is not its masonry of kiln-fired brick? Did not the 7 sages lay its foundations? The invitation is not a boast. It is a plea. Look at what we built. Remember that we were here. Tonight, let us accept that invitation. Imagine yourself rising above the darkened city, the cool night air carrying the scent of river water and wood smoke. Below you, Uruk stretches out like a living organism. Streets winding between mud brick houses, temples glowing with oil lamps, courtyards where families sleep beneath the stars. And surrounding it all, holding it together like a stone embrace, the walls. 10 kilometers of fired brick, nearly 1,000 semicircular towers punctuating the rampart like sentries frozen in clay. The walls are not merely defensive. They are a declaration. In a world where the gods had once wiped the slate clean with water, where the first humanity vanished almost without a trace, these walls say something. Defiant. You may flood the world again. You may send plague or famine or fire. But you will have to break through this first. And even if you do, the bricks will remain. The archaeological reality of Uruk confirms what the poem celebrates. The city at its height covered over 6 square kilometers, larger than classical Athens, denser than Renaissance Florence. Its population may have reached 80,000, a staggering concentration of humanity in an age when most people lived in scattered villages. The walls were not symbolic, they were necessary. Rival city-states pressed from every direction. Resources were precious and contested. To build such a structure required not just labor, but organization, authority, surplus, and will. And this is where the walls become something more than architecture. They are the signature of a new kind of human project. The first humanity, according to the texts, worked and multiplied and filled the world with noise, but left nothing that could outlast the flood. The second humanity, the one that rose after the waters receded, learned a different lesson. If existence can be revoked without warning, then the only answer is to build things that endure. Temples that point toward the sky, records pressed into clay, walls that will still be standing when the king who built them is dust. Gilgamesh, restless and mortal, understands this even if he cannot accept it. At the end of his journey, when every path to immortality has closed, he returns to these walls. He does not return in triumph. He returns in exhaustion, in grief, in the quiet clarity that follows the death of hope. And yet, standing on the rampart, he finds something that is not quite defeat. The walls are still here. The city still breathes. The bricks he fired will outlast his flesh by 5,000 years. Far from the walls of Uruk, in a wilderness the city has not yet reached, something moves through the tall grass. It runs with the gazelles, drinks beside them at the waterhole, knows no fire, no bread, no word for tomorrow. Its body is matted with hair, its muscles carved by endless motion, its eyes alert to every shift in the wind. The shepherds who glimpse it from a distance do not know what to call it. It looks like a man, but it lives like an animal. They are afraid, and so they send word to the king. This is Enkidu, and the story of his creation mirrors and inverts the story of humanity itself. The gods make him from clay, just as they made the first humans in the Atrahasis. But where those humans were shaped for labor, Enkidu is shaped for balance. He is meant to be a counterweight to Gilgamesh, an equal who can absorb the king's restless energy and redirect it away from the suffering people of Uruk. He is, in a sense, a correction to a correction, a patch applied to a system that keeps producing unexpected errors. But before Enkidu can fulfill his purpose, he must be transformed. He cannot challenge a king while running naked with animals. And so a temple priestess named Shamhat is sent to the wilderness to find him. She waits by the waterhole, and when Enkidu appears, she offers herself to him. For 6 days and 7 nights, they lie together. When Enkidu finally rises and tries to return to his herd, the gazelles flee from him. His legs, once tireless, now feel heavy. His senses, once sharp enough to hear a leaf fall, now seem muffled. Something has changed. The text describes this change without judgment, but its implications are profound. Enkidu has gained wisdom, the capacity for language, for reflection, for human connection. But he has lost something too. His unity with the natural world is broken. The animals no longer recognize him as one of their own. He has crossed a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, trading wildness for awareness, instinct for thought. Shamhat clothes him, teaches him to eat bread and drink beer, and leads him toward the city. By the time he reaches Uruk, he is no longer the creature the shepherds feared. He is a man. In Enkidu's transformation, we can hear an echo of the larger story the tablets tell. The first humanity, the one that lived before the flood, is often imagined as closer to nature, less constrained by the structures that define civilization. The second humanity, the one we belong to, is defined precisely by those structures: cities, kings, writing, law. Enkidu's journey from wild to tame is the journey of our species compressed into a single life. And like our species, he does not fully understand what he has given up until it is too late to go back. He enters Uruk with new eyes, seeking the king whose energy shook the heavens. He does not yet know that this meeting will change both of them forever. The news reaches Gilgamesh before Enkidu does. A wild man is coming, they say. A creature of impossible strength who has been living among animals, who has now been tamed and clothed. who walks toward Uruk with purpose in his stride. The king does not send soldiers to intercept him. He does not order the gates closed. Instead, something stirs in Gilgamesh that he cannot name. A recognition, perhaps, of a force that might finally match his own. They meet in the streets, at night, during a wedding celebration. Gilgamesh is striding toward the bride's house, exercising his royal privilege to be first in all things. Enkidu steps into his path and blocks the door. No words are exchanged. None are needed. The two men look at each other, and then they collide. The text describes the fight in terms usually reserved for natural disasters. They grapple like bulls. They shatter the doorposts. The walls shake. The ground trembles beneath their feet, as if the earth itself is uncertain which of them to support. Neither can gain the upper hand. Every throw is countered, every grip broken and re-established. The people of Uruk scatter to the edges of the street and watch in terrified silence as their king, for the first time in memory, meets something he cannot simply overwhelm. Finally, exhausted, the two men stop. They stand in the wreckage of the doorway, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. And then something shifts. Gilgamesh laughs or weeps or both. He reaches out, and Enkidu clasps his arm. The fight is over. What begins in its place is something the epic will call the deepest friendship in all of ancient literature. But look closer at what this moment represents. Gilgamesh is the perfected product of the second creation, urban, royal, divine in ancestry, master of walls and writing and organized labor. Enkidu is something older, something the second design tried to leave behind. Wild, instinctual, unmediated by civilization. Alone, each is incomplete. Gilgamesh has power but no peace. His energy devours everything around him. Enkidu has innocence but no purpose. His strength served only survival until Shamhat gave him something to walk toward. Together, they form a whole, the city and the wild, the king and the untamed, the divine ambition and the animal grace. For a brief, shining stretch of the narrative, this union transforms both of them. Gilgamesh's tyranny softens. His restlessness finds a channel. Enkidu gains language, meaning a brother who sees him as equal. The destructive force that once oppressed Uruk now turns outward, toward adventure, toward glory, toward the kind of heroic deeds that will echo through millennia. And yet the union is fragile. It depends on two individuals, not on a design. The Anunnaki did not build humanity to contain both halves at once. The balance Gilgamesh and Enkidu achieve is temporary, personal, and, as the story will soon reveal, tragically mortal. What was split apart by divine engineering can only be rejoined by love. And love, in this world, does not last forever. With their bond forged in combat, Gilgamesh and Enkidu turn their combined strength outward. The king is no longer content to pace the walls of Uruk like a caged lion, wants glory. The kind that will make his name echo through ages. The kind that will prove he is more than a mortal, waiting for death. And so he proposes a quest that makes even Enkidu hesitate. They will travel to the cedar forest, that vast and ancient woodland at the edge of the known world. And they will kill its guardian, the monster called Humbaba. The cedar forest is not merely a place of trees. The texts describe it as a realm of the gods, dense with shadows, heavy with silence, untouched by human axes. The cedars themselves are sacred, tall beyond imagining, fragrant with resin, their wood prized for temples and palaces. But no one harvests them freely. The forest is protected by Humbaba, a creature appointed by Enlil himself to keep humanity out. His roar is the flood. His breath is fire. His face, the tablets say, is a terror that paralyzes all who look upon it. Enkidu knows this place. In his wild years, he heard the stories. He felt the boundary between the world where humans walk and the world where older powers still hold sway. He warns Gilgamesh. He describes the Guardians' 7 auras of radiance, each one a weapon, each one capable of turning a hero to ash. But Gilgamesh will not be dissuaded. If death is certain, he reasons, then let him die doing something that will be remembered. Let the name Gilgamesh be carved into the cedars he fells. They journey for days, crossing mountains and rivers, until the forest rises before them like a green wall. The silence is immediate and total. No birds, no wind, only the faint, rhythmic pulse of something breathing in the deep. Enkidu's courage falters, but Gilgamesh takes his hand, and together they enter. The battle with Humbaba is not a simple contest of strength. The monster pleads, bargains, tries to turn the friends against each other. He offers Gilgamesh endless timber, endless power, if only he will spare his life. For a moment, the king hesitates, but Enkidu urges him to strike. To show mercy to this creature is to invite future vengeance. And so the axe falls. Humbaba dies cursing them both. The cedars crash to the ground, and the sacred silence of the forest is shattered forever. The gods watch. Some are pleased. The timber will build their temples higher. But others, Enlil chief among them, see something dangerous in this victory. Humanity 2.0 was designed with limits, meant to serve, not to conquer. And yet, here are 2 of its members standing in a forbidden place, having killed a divine guardian, claiming the wild as their own. The success is real. The glory is real. But so is the debt. And somewhere in the heavens, the ledger is already being balanced. They return to Uruk as heroes. The cedars are floated down the Euphrates, destined for temples and palaces. The people line the streets to see their king, radiant with victory, his wild companion beside him. Gilgamesh washes the blood and dust from his body, dresses in royal garments, and places the crown back upon his head. He has never looked more magnificent. And from the heights of heaven, someone is watching. Ishtar, goddess of love and war, daughter of Anu himself, looks down at the triumphant king and is seized by desire. She descends to him with an offer that would make any mortal tremble with gratitude. "Become my lover," she says. "I will give you a chariot of gold and lapis lazuli. Kings and princes will kneel before you. Your goats will bear triplets, your ewes twins. Everything you touch will flourish." All she asks in return is him. It is, on the surface, the highest honor a human can receive, a goddess offering her eternal favor. But Gilgamesh does not kneel. He does not stammer with gratitude. Instead, he looks at Ishtar and begins to speak, and what comes out of his mouth is not reverence. It is a litany of accusation. "What happened to Tammuz?" he asks, "the lover of your youth? You decreed for him weeping year after year. What happened to the shepherd bird whose wing you broke? What happened to the lion for whom you dug 7 pits? What happened to the horse whom you drove to exhaustion and then whipped? What happened to the shepherd whom you struck and turned into a wolf so that his own dogs now chase him?" Each question is a wound. Each name is a reminder that Ishtar's love does not end well for those who receive it. The goddess stands silent as Gilgamesh dismantles her offer piece by piece. He is not merely rejecting her. He is exposing her. He is saying, in front of heaven and earth, that the gods are not to be trusted, that their affection is a trap, their favor a curse, their promises written in sand. For a mortal to speak this way to a deity is unthinkable, and yet he speaks. Ishtar's response is immediate. She flies to her father Anu, weeping with rage, demanding vengeance. "Give me the bull of heaven," she cries, "and I will unleash it upon Uruk. If you refuse, I will break open the gates of the underworld and let the dead rise to devour the living." Anu hesitates, warns her of the famine the bull will bring, but she insists. The bull is released. It descends upon Uruk like a living earthquake, snorting chasms into the earth, killing hundreds with each breath. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu are ready. Together, they bring the beast down. Enkidu seizes it by the horns, while Gilgamesh drives his sword into its neck. When Ishtar appears on the walls, shrieking with grief, Enkidu tears off the bull's thigh and hurls it at her face. The insult is complete. The gods have been defied, mocked, and humiliated. And the price for such defiance is already being calculated. The celebration does not last. In the days following the bull's death, something shifts in the heavens. The divine council convenes, and their deliberation is brief. Humbaba is dead. The bull of heaven is dead. Ishtar has been publicly humiliated. Someone must pay. The question is only who. Anu speaks first. Gilgamesh is 2/3 divine. His bloodline offers some protection. But Enkidu is made entirely of clay. He was shaped for a purpose, and that purpose has now been twisted into defiance. The verdict falls like a stone into still water. Enkidu must die. The death does not come swiftly. It would almost be kinder if it did. Instead, Enkidu sickens. He wakes one morning with a fever that will not break, a weakness that spreads through his limbs like water soaking into sand. For 12 days, he lies on his bed, while the man who was his equal, his brother, his other half, watches helplessly from beside him. The text lingers on these final days with unflinching honesty. Enkidu does not die like a hero. He does not fall in battle with a sword in his hand. He wastes away, his wild strength draining out of him hour by hour. In his fever, he dreams of the underworld, a place the tablets call the House of Dust. He describes it to Gilgamesh in a voice grown thin and distant. "It is a dark house," he says, "where kings and priests sit stripped of their crowns and vestments. They wear feathers like birds. They eat clay and drink mud. There is no light. There is no return. This is what waits for all of us." Gilgamesh does not leave his side. He holds Enkidu's hand as the fever climbs. He speaks to him, sings to him, begs him to hold on. But the divine decree cannot be bargained with. On the 12th day, Enkidu falls silent. His chest rises once more, and then it does not rise again. What follows is one of the most raw and human moments in all of ancient literature. Gilgamesh does not accept the death. He refuses to let the body be taken for burial. For 6 days and 7 nights, he sits beside his friend, watching, waiting, hoping for some sign of breath. It is only when a maggot drops from Enkidu's nose, a detail the text does not spare us, that the king finally understands. This is real. This is permanent. This is what death looks like up close. And in that moment, something breaks open inside Gilgamesh. He is not only mourning his friend, he is seeing his own future. If Enkidu, who was his equal in strength, who ran with animals and fought beside gods, can be reduced to rotting meat in a matter of days, then so can he. Mortality is not an accident. It is a design, a limit built into the clay. And Gilgamesh, for all his divine blood, is not exempt. The king who feared nothing now knows fear, and it will drive him to the ends of the earth. When Gilgamesh finally releases the body for burial, he does not return to his throne. He does not wash the grief from his face or put on the robes of kingship. Instead, he strips away everything that made him king. He covers himself in the skins of lions and wanders out of Uruk's gates into the wilderness, looking less like a ruler than like the wild man Enkidu once was. The transformation is deliberate. The city, with its walls and rituals and ordered days, now feels like a waiting room for death. He cannot sit still inside it any longer. His quest, as he will tell anyone who asks, is simple. He is looking for eternal life. He wants to find the one human being who escaped death, Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood, the man the gods made immortal and exiled to the edge of the world. If such a thing was given once, Gilgamesh reasons, perhaps it can be given again. Perhaps there is a secret, a formula, a loophole in the design. He will walk to the end of existence itself to find it. The journey that follows is not a hero's march, but a desperate flight. The texts describe him crossing mountains no human has crossed, wandering through darkness for days without rest, growing gaunt and weathered until even those who meet him cannot believe he was once a king. His grief has become his fuel, but it is also consuming him. Every step is an argument with the universe. Every mile is a refusal to accept the terms he was born under. And here, in this wild, grief-stricken wandering, we see something remarkable, something that separates the second humanity from the first. The Eogstans, humans before the flood, were destroyed for being too alive, too loud, too fertile. They filled the world with noise, and the gods silenced them. But this new humanity, the one that rose after the waters receded, was built differently. Their lives are shorter, their bodies are more fragile. They are designed to burn out before they become a problem. And yet, and this is the bitter irony the tablets seem to recognize, they are also designed to know it. The first humans may have lived longer, but there is no record that they agonized over mortality. Gilgamesh does. He has been given just enough divine awareness to understand what he is missing, and just enough mortal limitation to be unable to reach it. He can imagine eternity, but he cannot have it. This is not a flaw in the design, it is the design. In that sense, Gilgamesh's journey is more than a personal quest. It is the first recorded rebellion of a human consciousness against its own source code. He is not fighting an enemy. He is fighting the very conditions of his existence. He is saying to the Anunnaki, to the universe, to whatever power shaped him from clay and divine residue, I refuse to accept this quietly. I will walk until I find an answer, or until I fall. The wilderness gives way to mountains, and the mountains grow stranger with each passing day. Gilgamesh climbs through landscapes that no longer feel entirely real. Peaks that scrape the belly of heaven, valleys where the shadows move wrong. And then, rising before him like two pillars holding up the sky, he sees them, the twin mountains of Mashu, the place where the sun enters the earth each night and emerges each morning. He has reached the edge of the world. The gate between the mountains is not unguarded. Standing before it are creatures the texts call scorpion people, beings whose upper bodies are human, whose lower bodies are the segmented tails and claws of scorpions, whose very appearance radiates a terror that the tablets describe as death itself. No mortal has ever passed this way. No mortal was ever meant to. They look at the ragged figure approaching them and see something impossible. A man still breathing, still walking, in a place where breath and walking should have ended long ago. They challenge him. Who are you? Why have you come? Gilgamesh answers with the only truth he has left. He tells them of Enkidu, of death, of the question that now drives him like a fever. He is looking for Utnapishtim. He is looking for the secret of eternal life. He knows the path ahead is impossible. He does not care. Perhaps it is his divine blood. Perhaps it is the raw desperation in his voice. Whatever the reason, the scorpion people step aside. They warn him. The tunnel of the sun is 12 double hours long. No light penetrates it. No human has ever made the crossing. If he does not reach the other side before the sun enters behind him, he will be incinerated. Gilgamesh thanks them and walks into the dark. The next passage of the epic is almost unbearable to read. 12 double hours of absolute blackness. No stars, no ground, no sky. Only the sensation of moving forward through a void so complete, it erases the difference between open eyes and closed ones. Gilgamesh runs. He cannot see his own hands. He cannot hear anything but his own breath and the pounding of his heart. Time loses meaning. Direction loses meaning. He is not walking through a tunnel. He is passing through death itself while still alive. A rehearsal for the end he is trying to escape. And then, just as the heat begins to build behind him, just as the first edge of solar fire threatens to catch his heels, he bursts into light. The garden that greets him is not of this world. The trees are made of gemstones, carnelian, lapis lazuli, crystal, bearing fruit that glitters like frozen starlight. The ground is soft. The air is sweet. For a moment, Gilgamesh can only stand and stare, overwhelmed by a beauty so intense it feels like grief. He has stepped outside of ordinary human time, into a place where the rules that govern the second creation may not fully apply. Somewhere ahead, the immortal survivor waits. The answer is close now. Beyond the jeweled garden, at the edge of waters that stretch toward infinity, Gilgamesh finds a small tavern. It sits alone on the shore, impossibly ordinary after all he has passed through. A simple structure of reed and clay, the kind of place where travelers might stop for bread and beer before continuing on their way. But there are no other travelers here. There is only the woman who keeps the tavern, and she sees him coming from a long way off. Her name is Siduri, and the texts call her an alewife. A brewer and keeper of drink, one of the most ancient professions of civilization. She looks at the figure stumbling toward her door and sees something that frightens her. His skin is burned by sun and wind. His cheeks are hollow. He wears animal skins matted with filth. His eyes carry a wildness that does not belong to a sane man. She does what anyone might do. She bars her door and climbs to the roof, putting solid walls between herself and whatever this creature might be. Gilgamesh calls up to her. He tells her who he is, or who he was. He speaks of Uruk, of the walls, of Enkidu, of death. He explains his quest. He is looking for Utnapishtim. He is looking for a way to live forever. He has crossed mountains and darkness and the territory of scorpion people. He has come too far to be stopped by a locked door. Slowly, Siduri descends. She lets him in, gives him bread and beer, and listens as the king of Uruk pours out his grief in the dim light of her tavern. And when he finishes, she gives him the only answer she has. It is not the answer he wants. It is perhaps the most honest answer in all of ancient literature. Gilgamesh, she says, where are you wandering? The life you seek you will never find. When the gods created mankind, they allotted death to mankind. Life they kept in their own hands. As for you, let your belly be full. Make merry day and night. Dance and play day and night. Let your clothes be clean. Let your head be washed. Bathe in water. Cherish the little child who holds your hand. Let your wife delight in your embrace. For this is the task of mankind. The words are gentle but absolute. There is no secret door, no hidden formula, no exception clause in the contract of mortality. The gods have kept eternal life for themselves, and no amount of wandering will change that. What Siduri offers instead is not immortality, but presence. The fullness of immortal life lived in awareness of its limits. Eat well, love well, hold your children, let each day be enough. Gilgamesh hears her. For a moment, something in him wavers. But he cannot stop. Not yet. The grief is still too fresh. The hope still too alive. He thanks her for the bread and the wisdom, and then he asks the question that will carry him forward. How do I cross the waters of death? Siduri gives him the direction he needs. Across the waters, she says, lives the one he seeks. But there is only one way to cross, a ferryman named Ur-Shanabi, who serves Utnapishtim and knows the secret path through the lethal sea. She warns Gilgamesh that the waters of death are not like any ocean he has seen. A single drop on bare skin will end a life. To touch them is to die. Gilgamesh finds Ur-Shanabi at the shore, but in his impatience and grief-driven madness, he makes a terrible mistake. Before asking questions, he attacks. He smashes the stone things that the ferryman keeps, sacred objects, perhaps idols, perhaps ballast, that were essential to the crossing. When Ur-Shanabi finally calms him and hears his purpose, he looks at the wreckage and delivers the bad news. Without those stone things, the crossing will be nearly impossible. A new method must be improvised. The solution is brutal in its simplicity. Gilgamesh must cut 300 punting poles, each 60 cubits long, and he must wrap his hands so that not a single drop of the deadly water touches his skin. Each pole can only be used once. One push, and it must be abandoned to the sea before the water climbs it and reaches his fingers. 300 chances. No room for error. Imagine the crossing. The boat moves slowly over black water that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. There is no horizon, only a gray haze where sky and sea dissolve into each other. Gilgamesh stands at the back of the small vessel, driving the first pole down, pushing, and then releasing it before the wetness can creep up the wood. He grabs the second pole, push, release, the third, the fourth. Each motion is identical. Each pole vanishes into the dark water behind them, leaving no trace. The count becomes a kind of prayer. 100 poles gone, and the shore behind them has long since disappeared. 200 poles, and Gilgamesh's arms burn with exhaustion. His breath comes in ragged gasps. The far shore is still invisible. He begins to wonder if there is a far shore, or if this sea stretches into eternity, a test with no end. When the last pole is spent, Utnapishtim's island is still not in sight. Ur-Shanabi tells him to use whatever he has left. Gilgamesh strips off his cloak, the lion skin that has covered him since he left Uruk, and raises it as a sail. The wind, if there is wind in this dead place, catches it just enough. The boat drifts forward, painfully slow, while the king stands exposed, his body a mast, his garment his final gamble. And then, at last, a shape emerges from the haze. Land, solid ground where no mortal has stood before. The boat scrapes against the shore, and Gilgamesh steps off onto the edge of the world. Somewhere on this island, the man who lived through the flood is waiting. The answer is finally within reach. The island is quiet in a way that feels ancient, as if sound itself has grown tired of visiting. Gilgamesh walks inland, his bare feet pressing into soil that no other mortal has touched. He expects to find a palace, perhaps, or a temple, some structure befitting a man who conquered death. Instead, he finds a simple dwelling near the water's edge, and sitting before it, an old man watching the waves. Utnapishtim looks up at the approaching stranger without surprise. He has had a long time to wait, after all. Centuries. Millennia. Time enough for the urgency of living to fade into something more like observation. He sees the haggard figure before him, sunburned, gaunt, wild-eyed with desperation. And he knows immediately what this visitor wants. It is the only thing anyone would cross the waters of death to ask. Gilgamesh is startled. He expected a god, or something close to it. He expected radiance, power, perhaps a terrifying majesty. Instead, he sees a man who looks like any elder who might sit in the shade of Uruk's walls, watching grandchildren play. There is nothing divine in Utnapishtim's appearance. If anything, he seems tired, not physically, but existentially, as if eternity has worn smooth the edges of his interest in existing. The king of Uruk pours out his story. Enkidu, the grief, the wandering, the tunnel of the sun, the jeweled garden, the waters of death. He has come to learn the secret. How did Utnapishtim escape the fate that awaits all humans? How did he become immortal? Utnapishtim listens, and then he answers with a question of his own. Do you think I earned this? Do you think there is a ritual, a password, a trick that will unlock the same door for you? What follows is the story we have already heard. The flood, the council's decree, Enki's whispered warning, the ark, the 7 days of rain, the mountain, the sacrifice, the gods gathering like flies around the smoke. Utnapishtim tells it without pride. If anything, there is a note of bitterness in his voice. His immortality was not a reward. It was an afterthought. The gods, having destroyed nearly everything they made, were suddenly faced with their own hunger. The offerings had stopped. The temples were empty. When Utnapishtim lit his sacrifice, they were so starved they could not punish him. Instead, they gave him eternal life and sent him here, to the edge of existence, where he could live forever without reminding them of their mistake. It was a one-time exception, Utnapishtim says, a glitch born of guilt and desperation. The Anunnaki have no intention of repeating it. They learned from the flood. The second humanity was designed to be more manageable, shorter lives, clearer limits, no loopholes. Gilgamesh has walked to the end of the world to find a door that was sealed behind the last person who passed through it. And yet, seeing the despair in the young king's eyes, Utnapishtim offers one final test. If you want to live forever, Utnapishtim says, you must first prove you can master the small death that comes every night. Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Do not let sleep touch you. If you can conquer the little darkness, perhaps you are ready for the greater one. It seems almost insultingly simple. Gilgamesh has crossed mountains, run through the tunnel of the sun, survived the waters of death. Surely he can stay awake for a week. He sits down, sets his jaw, and fixes his eyes on the horizon. He will not fail. He cannot fail. Everything he has suffered has led to this moment. And then, almost immediately, he fails. The text does not soften it. Sleep rolls over Gilgamesh like a fog, like a tide, like the flood itself. His eyes close, his head drops. Within moments of accepting the challenge, the king of Uruk is unconscious, breathing deep and slow, lost in the very darkness he swore to resist. Utnapishtim watches without surprise. He has seen this before, not in other visitors, for there have been none, but in himself, long ago, when he too was mortal and subject to the body's demands. He turns to his wife and tells her to bake bread. Each day that Gilgamesh sleeps, she will bake a loaf and set it beside his head. The bread will be their witness, their calendar, their proof. The days pass. The first loaf grows stale. The second develops a crust. The third begins to harden. The fourth shows the first spots of mold. The fifth is green with decay. The sixth crumbles at a touch. The seventh is fresh from the oven when Gilgamesh finally stirs, blinking, disoriented, convinced he has only dozed for a moment. He looks at Utnapishtim with the fragile hope of a man who believes he has succeeded. And then the old immortal points to the loaves arranged in a line beside him. "Count them," he says. "See for yourself how long you slept." Gilgamesh looks. The truth is undeniable, baked into bread and rot. 7 loaves, 7 days. He slept through the entire trial without once opening his eyes. The challenge that seemed so simple was, in fact, impossible. Not because Gilgamesh was weak, but because he was human. This is the moment of revelation the entire journey has been building toward. Sleep is not a choice. It is a requirement written into the design of the second creation. Every human being must periodically surrender consciousness, must release control, must practice a small death each night in preparation for the final one. The Anunnaki built this limit into the clay. It cannot be trained away. It cannot be resisted forever. The body will always, eventually, demand its darkness. If you cannot conquer sleep, Utnapishtim says quietly, how did you ever imagine you could conquer death? Gilgamesh has no answer. He sits among the moldering bread, and for the first time, the weight of his mortality presses down on him without any hope to lift it. Gilgamesh prepares to leave. There is nothing left for him here, no secret, no ritual, no door that will open onto eternal life. He has walked to the edge of existence and found only confirmation of what Siduri told him by the sea. The gods kept life for themselves. He thanks Utnapishtim for his honesty, gathers himself, and turns toward the shore where Urshanabi waits. But Utnapishtim's wife stops him with a question aimed at her husband. "This man has come so far," she says. "He has suffered so much. Will you really send him home with nothing?" Her voice is soft, but it carries the weight of someone who has had eternity to consider the meaning of mercy. Utnapishtim hesitates. He looks at the broken king standing before him, a man who has lost everything, who crossed the waters of death only to fail a test while sitting still. And something in him relents. "There is one more thing," he says. "Not immortality. That door is closed forever. But there is a plant that grows at the bottom of the sea, a thorny thing that will prick the hands of anyone who grasps it. Its name is the old man becomes young. If you eat it, it will restore your youth. It will not make you live forever, but it will let you live again." The words land like a second chance. Gilgamesh's despair lifts, replaced by a desperate, fragile hope. He asks where, he asks how. Utnapishtim points to the water. Without hesitation, Gilgamesh ties heavy stones to his feet. He wades into the sea, not the waters of death, but some other deep, perhaps the cosmic ocean that underlies all things, and lets the weight pull him down. The light fades. The pressure builds. The cold wraps around him like a fist. He sinks through layers of darkness, his lungs burning, his vision narrowing, until at last he sees it. A plant with thorns like teeth, growing where no light has ever reached. He grabs it. The thorns tear into his palms. Blood clouds the water around his hands. But he does not let go. He cuts the stones from his feet, and the sea spits him back toward the surface. He breaks into the air, gasping, bleeding, alive, and clutching the impossible gift. For a moment, standing in the shallows, with the plant pressed against his chest, Gilgamesh feels something he has not felt since Enkidu died. Hope. Not the false hope of escaping death entirely, but something gentler. He will return to Uruk. He will give this plant to the elders first. Let them taste youth again before he takes any for himself. He will share this gift with his people. Perhaps this is what the journey was always meant to teach him. Not how to live forever alone, but how to bring something precious back for others. He boards the boat with Ur-Shanabi. The island fades behind them. The crossing is easier now, the waters of death already passed. Ahead lies home, and in his hands, wrapped carefully against his chest, lies the one loophole the Anunnaki may have overlooked. Or so he believes. The journey home is long, but it no longer feels desperate. Gilgamesh has something to carry now, something that makes each step purposeful rather than frantic. The plant rests against his chest, wrapped in cloth, its thorns still sharp enough to prick through the fabric. He guards it the way a father might guard a sleeping child. This is his gift to Uruk. This is what he will bring back from the edge of the world. Days pass. The landscape grows more familiar. Rivers he does not recognize give way to rivers he does. The air changes, softening, carrying the faint scent of marshland and civilization. He's getting close. Soon he will see the walls again, the fired brick ramparts that once seemed like his only legacy. Now he has something better. On a warm afternoon, Gilgamesh comes upon a pool of cool water, clear, inviting, fed by a spring that bubbles up from deep beneath the earth. The journey has left him caked in dust and dried sweat. His skin is cracked from sun and wind. He has not bathed properly since before the tunnel of the sun, and the sight of clean water is almost overwhelming. He decides to stop, just for a moment, just long enough to wash the road from his body before the final stretch home. He sets the plant down on the bank, close to the water's edge where he can see it. He wades in. The coolness is a blessing, soaking into muscles that have carried him across the world. He dips his head under, lets the water run through his hair, feels the grime lifting away. For a few precious minutes, he is simply a man enjoying a bath. Not a king, not a seeker, not a mourner. He does not see the snake. It emerges from a crack in the rocks, drawn by a scent it cannot name but cannot resist. The plant lies unguarded, fragrant with something the animal world recognizes even if it has no word for it. Renewal. The snake slides over the stones, silent as a shadow. It opens its mouth and swallows the plant whole. By the time Gilgamesh turns around, it is already happening. The snake's old skin is splitting. A new creature is emerging from within, glistening and fresh, pulling itself free of its former self the way a man might shrug off a worn cloak. The shed skin lies crumpled on the rocks, translucent and empty. The snake, renewed, slithers away into the grass and vanishes. Gilgamesh stands in the water, watching it go. For a long moment, he does not move. He does not shout or chase. He simply stares at the place where the plant was, now empty, and at the discarded skin that marks the transfer of everything he fought for. Then he sits down on the bank, still wet, and he weeps. The tears are not just for himself. They are for every human who will ever reach for something beyond their grasp. They are for Enkidu, for Uruk, for the entire second creation that was designed to want what it cannot have. The snake did not steal eternal life. It stole the consolation prize, and even that, it seems, was never meant for human hands. The journey back to Uruk is quiet. Gilgamesh walks without urgency now. There is nothing left to chase, no secret waiting at the next horizon, no plant clutched against his chest. His hands are empty. His quest is over. The man who set out from these walls dressed in lion skins and driven by terror now returns with nothing but the knowledge of what he cannot have. Urshanabi walks beside him. The ferryman has no home to return to. His purpose was to serve Utnapishtim, and that service is complete. Now he follows this strange king who crossed the waters of death and came back with only grief. They do not speak much. There is little left to say. When the walls of Uruk finally rise on the horizon, Gilgamesh stops. He has seen them 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never from the outside, after being so far outside that even the stars looked different. The ramparts stretch across the floodplain, massive and confident, their fired bricks glowing warm in the late afternoon light. 900 towers punctuate the circuit, like sentries frozen in clay. Behind them, the ziggurat rises toward heaven, and the smoke of offerings drifts upward in thin threads. He built this. Not alone. Thousands of hands laid these bricks. Thousands of backs bent under the weight of mud and straw and ambition. But the will that organized them, the authority that commanded them, the vision that said these walls shall stand, that was his. Before the quest, he saw the walls as evidence of his power. Now he sees them differently. They are not proof that he mattered. They are proof that something can outlast the one who made it. Gilgamesh turns to Urshanabi and speaks the same words that open the epic itself. He invites the ferryman to climb the walls, to walk their circuit, to examine the foundation and inspect the brickwork. 1 square mile of city, he says, 1 square mile of gardens, 1 square mile of clay pits, and the temple precinct of Ishtar. 3 square miles in the temple precinct make up Uruk. The words are not boasting. They are an offering. This is what I have, Gilgamesh is saying. This is what remains when the plant is eaten and the friend is buried, and the immortal exile offers no salvation. The walls do not breathe. They do not laugh or grieve or age. But they endure. They will still be standing when his bones are dust, when his name is pressed into tablets by scribes who never knew him, when the very language he speaks has become a puzzle for scholars in unimaginable futures. This is the immortality the Anunnaki did not anticipate. They designed the second humanity to die quickly, to burn out before becoming a problem. But they gave us hands that can shape clay and minds that can dream beyond our lifespan. We cannot live forever, but we can build things that do. We can write words that outlast breath. We can raise walls that remember us when no one living does. Gilgamesh enters his city. He is still mortal, but he is no longer afraid. The walls of Uruk still stand behind Gilgamesh as he walks through his city. But the story does not end with his quiet acceptance. The tablets do not let it end there. They keep speaking, long after the king is dust, long after the bricks themselves have crumbled into the desert. And if we step back from the single life of one grieving man and look at the whole pattern, something unsettling begins to appear. There is the Atrahasis. Humans shaped from clay and divine blood to replace rebellious gods, then destroyed because they multiplied too fast. There is the flood that wipes almost everything clean. There is the redescent of kingship, the sudden shortening of reigns, the appearance of writing and cities and ration bowls and bureaucracy. There is Gilgamesh himself, 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal, raging against the very limits that define the new humanity. And running through all of it, faint but persistent, are echoes of something older. The king list never quite forgets the antediluvian age. It lists the names of cities that existed before the flood, as if they were already there when the first kingship came down. It gives reign lengths that no human body could endure, 28,800 years, 36,000 years. Numbers that feel less like exaggeration and more like memory stretched thin across a catastrophe. There are the Apkallu, the 7 antediluvian sages, half human, half fish, who brought civilization to mankind before the deluge and then vanished. There are myths of knowledge that arrived fully formed. Astronomy, mathematics, law, too perfect for a species that had only just invented writing. The Sumerians write as though they are standing on the rubble of another world. They do not say it outright. They do not need to. It is in the way they speak of before the flood, as casually as we speak of before breakfast, as if everyone knows there was a before, and that the before was different. They record the descent of kingship twice, once before the waters, once after, as if the gods themselves needed a restart. They build temples on older temples, layer upon layer, reaching down into soil that sometimes yields strange things. Foundations too precise, bricks too large, fragments of a past that does not quite fit. They are writing with amnesia, but not complete amnesia. They remember enough to feel the loss. They remember long-lived kings and sages who walked out of the sea. They remember a time when humanity was louder, wilder, closer to the gods, and when the gods decided that was a mistake. The second creation is quieter, more orderly, more fragile. It is designed to die quickly and leave records behind, and the records themselves become the haunting. Every tablet pressed with a stylus is a whisper that says we were here, and before us, someone else was here, and before them, perhaps someone else still. Gilgamesh learned to accept his walls, but the tablets refuse to accept silence. They keep copying the old lists, keep telling the old stories, keep hinting at a humanity that came before the one we know. A humanity that was erased not for being weak, but for being too strong. And in that refusal to forget completely lies the deepest wound of all. The tablets fall silent, but the earth does not. Beneath the layers of sand and city rubble, beneath the flood, deposits of Mesopotamia, there is another record, one written not in cuneiform, but in ice, in sediment, in the sudden absence of bones. 12,800 years ago, long before Uruk, before writing, before any name we know, the world was warming. The great ice sheets that had covered half the planet were retreating. Sea levels rose, forests spread. Humans hunted mammoths across open tundra, followed herds, painted caves, and perhaps began to settle in places that are now under hundreds of feet of ocean. Then, abruptly, the warmth reversed. In some places, the temperature plunged 15 degrees in a single decade. The northern hemisphere snapped back into near-glacial cold that lasted 12 centuries. Megafauna vanished almost overnight. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths. The Clovis hunters of North America disappear from the record as if erased. A thin, dark layer appears in sediments across 4 continents. The black mat, rich in charcoal, soot, nanodiamonds, iridium, and melted glass. Hallmarks of temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. Scientists call this the Younger Dryas. The leading hypothesis is no longer mystery. It is impact. Earth passed through the debris trail of a disintegrating comet. Thousands of fragments slammed into ice sheets and oceans, igniting firestorms, triggering mega tsunamis, flash-melting huge volumes of ice and flooding continents. The sky would have burned for weeks. The sun would have vanished behind smoke. The survivors, few, scattered, stunned, would have told stories of a time when the heavens themselves turned against the world. Stand in any Mesopotamian tell and dig deep enough, and you sometimes hit water-laid clays that belong to no local river. Look at the Greenland ice cores, and you see the same spike in platinum, the same sudden cold. The dates align within a century or two of the Sumerian before the flood. The black mat is the same age as the layer that buried the oldest known monumental structures in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, built by people who should have been simple hunter-gatherers, yet carved 20-ton pillars in perfect circles before agriculture is supposed to have begun. We do not need literal Anunnaki to explain the pattern. The earth itself has a temper. It has struck the reset button before, and it has left scars that look exactly like divine wrath to anyone who lived through them. The flood myths in 500 cultures are not coincidences. They are trauma encoded into language, passed down by people who saw the sky fall and somehow kept walking. Whether the gods were beings in chariots or simply fragments of a shattered comet, the message is the same. The world can end. It has ended. And every civilization that rises afterward is built on the quiet knowledge that it might end again. The Sumerians wrote it in clay. We read it in ice. The story is older than either of us, and it is not finished. The story does not end with comets and ice. It circles back to a single word that has haunted us since the first Babylonian astronomers looked up and tried to name the forces that decide our fate. Nibiru. In its original context, Nibiru is not a planet at all. It is a crossing point, a ferry, a place in the sky where the paths of gods and stars intersect. Babylonian priests used the term for the moment when a celestial body, often Jupiter, sometimes Mercury, sometimes the bright star we call Canopus, stood at the highest point of its arc, the zenith that marked the turning of the year. Marduk, the rising god of Babylon, was given 50 names, and one of them was Nibiru, the one who holds the crossing of heaven and earth, the guarantor that the sun will rise tomorrow, that the calendar will not fail, that chaos will be kept at bay. That is the ancient meaning. Not doom, but order. A celestial lighthouse reminding mortals that the universe is governed, predictable, and for now, benevolent. Then, in 1976, a single book took the word and turned it inside out. Zecharia Sitchin declared that Nibiru was not a station, but a planet. A massive, unseen world on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit, home to the Anunnaki themselves. In his telling, every time this rogue body swings through the inner solar system, it tears open the sky, triggers floods, resets civilizations. The Sumerian texts, he claimed, were not myth, but garbled history written by people who watched the sky fall and lived to tell it. No professional astronomer has ever found evidence for such an object. Its gravity would scramble the orbits we measure every night. Its light would have been seen centuries ago. Yet the idea refuses to die. It mutates, reappears on forums and videos, is grafted onto every new comet discovery or unexplained climate blip. Why? Because it speaks to the same fear the black mat speaks to. The fear that we are not the first, that we may not be the last, that the lease on our current version of humanity is temporary and renewable only at someone else's discretion. Whether that someone is a council of gods, a rogue planet, or a random comet swarm makes little difference. The emotional truth is identical. The universe has cycles we do not control, and one of those cycles may already be turning again. In the original Babylonian hymns, Nibiru was the promise that the cycle would stay gentle. In our retelling, it has become the warning that it might not. Both meanings are true at once. The word has simply followed the same path as every other fragment of the old story. It began as reassurance, survived a catastrophe, and emerged on the other side, carrying the memory of what almost ended us. The tablets are quiet now. The walls of Uruk are dust. Even the black mat has been buried under new layers of soil and time. And yet, the question that began with Gilgamesh's grief still lingers in the dark behind our eyes. What exactly did we lose? We have spent the night chasing the obvious losses. Long lives, a world without flood scars, perhaps cities older than any we have found. But there is another possibility, quieter and more intimate. What if the most important technology we ever had was not stone or bronze or writing, but the texture of consciousness itself? Every ancient tradition whispers the same thing. There was a time when the boundary between human and divine was thinner, when the mind could touch the stars without telescopes, when shamans walked into the earth and returned with knowledge, when the sages of the antediluvian age spoke directly to the forces that move seasons and fates. The Vedas call it Satya Yuga, the age of truth. The Greeks remember a golden age when men lived like gods. The Sumerians speak of Apkallu, who emerged from the sea carrying the arts of civilization in their very being. What if the catastrophe did not merely kill bodies and drown coastlines? What if it also shattered something in the mind? A wider bandwidth of perception, a calmer relationship with time, an unshakable sense of belonging to the cosmos? What if the second humanity was not only given shorter lives, but narrower awareness? More clever, more frightened, more trapped inside the skull. Look at us now. We measure the universe with instruments because we can no longer feel it. We build rockets because we have forgotten how to fly inward. We treat altered states as pathology or entertainment because we have lost the cultural memory of why they once mattered. We are brilliant at manipulating the outer world and strangely blind to the inner one. Gilgamesh's journey ends where it began, on the walls, but the epic itself refuses to close the door. It leaves us with a man who has touched the edge of everything and come back empty-handed, yet somehow changed. He does not live forever, but in accepting that he will not, he becomes something the gods did not design, a conscious mortal, a being who knows the cage and chooses to sing inside it anyway. Perhaps that is the real, project now. Not to dig up a lost continent or wait for a planet that never comes, but to remember what it felt like when the sky and the self were not two things. To widen the aperture again, to let the old frequencies back in. The walls, the stories, the tablets. They were never just about survival. They were messages in bottles, thrown forward across the flood, saying, you were once more than this. You can be again. And as your breathing slows, as the room around you softens into night, carry that single thought with you into sleep. The lost technology might not be out there among the stars. It might be in here, waiting behind the noise we were taught to fear. The night has carried us a long way, from the black mat of a burned sky to the fired bricks of Uruk, from the grief of a king who refused to die quietly to the quiet grief of a species that still refuses to forget. The tablets have done their work. They have spoken in their cracked, wedge-shaped voices across 5,000 years, and now they fall silent. We close them gently, the way you might close the eyes of someone who has just told you everything they know. There is no tidy conclusion pressed into the clay. No final line that says, and this is the truth. Only fragments that keep catching the light differently every time we turn them over. A first humanity shaped for labor and erased for noise. A flood that was both punishment and reboot. A second humanity given shorter lives and sharper questions. A king who walked to the edge of the world and came back with nothing but the knowledge that the walls would outlast him. Whether the Anunnaki were beings of flesh or metaphor. Whether Nibiru was a planet or a prayer. whether the Younger Dryas was divine wrath or cosmic accident. None of that resolves the ache the tablets leave behind. They leave us standing exactly where Gilgamesh stood on his rampart at the end. Mortal, exhausted, strangely calm, and unable to look away from the question that started everything. If we were created once and found wanting, if we were created twice and given limits, what will we do if a third chance ever comes? Will we build higher walls? Will we widen the mind instead of the skyline? Will we finally learn to live inside a day without needing to own forever? The room around you is darker now. The voice that has been speaking all night softens to a whisper, the way a storyteller lowers the lamp when the tale is done. Outside, somewhere beyond roofs and satellites and centuries, the same stars that once watched a flood recede are still turning in their ancient courses. They do not care whether we are the first humanity, the second, or something yet to be decided. But we care. And that caring, that refusal to close the tablet and walk away, is the only third creation the story has ever promised us. So let the question stay open. Let it follow you into whatever dreams are waiting. Let it sit in the quiet space between one breath and the next. The ost clay is cold now. The wedges no longer catch the lamplight. But somewhere inside you, a small fire that was lit tonight is still burning. Sleep if you need to. Wake if you must. The mystery was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be carried.